Somewhere in ancient Rome, a man sits down to eat. Bread, vegetables, meat, maybe fish, maybe eggs, maybe something sweet. And then, before eating, he reaches for one ingredient. Not ketchup, not soy sauce, not hot sauce. A bottle of fermented fish liquid. Made from fish parts, salt, thyme, heat, and a smell so strong that the factories making it were often kept away from crowded places. To us, that sounds disgusting. But to ancient Romans, this was flavor. This was luxury. This was normal. This was garum. And for centuries, Romans poured it on almost everything. Now, pause there, because this is one of those moments where the past feels completely alien. How does one of the most powerful civilizations in history look at a sauce made from fermented fish and say, yes, put that on dinner? But the strange thing is, once you understand what garum actually did, it stops sounding stupid. It starts sounding familiar. Because the Romans were chasing the same thing we still chase today. Not fish, not rot. Flavor. Deep, salty, savory flavor. The kind of taste that makes food feel fuller than it really is. Today, we might call that umami. The Romans did not have that word, but they knew the feeling. A plain vegetable tasted better with garum. A simple stew tasted richer. A piece of meat tasted deeper. Even cheap food could feel more alive. That is the first key. Garum was not just some weird Roman habit. It was a flavor technology. A way to turn ordinary food into something stronger. And in a world without refrigerators, supermarkets, delivery apps, or endless seasoning bottles, that mattered. Imagine a Roman kitchen. No freezer, no modern spice aisle, no plastic packets, no instant flavor powders. If you wanted taste, you had to build it from what the world gave you. Salt, oil, vinegar, herbs, wine, honey, and garum. Garum was powerful because it compressed the sea into a bottle. Fish were packed with salt and left to ferment. Over time, the mixture broke down. The liquid was collected. That liquid became the sauce. The smell may have been brutal, but the flavor was useful. And Romans were practical people. If something worked, they used it. And garum worked everywhere. Rich people could buy expensive versions. Poorer people could use cheaper versions. Some sauces were refined and costly. Some were rough and basic. But the idea was the same. A little liquid could make food taste bigger. That is why garum spread across the empire. It moved in amphorae, those tall clay jars used for trade, across ports, across markets, across Roman roads. Across kitchens, from Spain to Italy, from North Africa to the wider Mediterranean. This was not just sauce, it was business. Entire coastal industries existed to salt fish, ferment fish, bottle the liquid, and sell it. Some towns became known for it. Some merchants got rich from it. And in Pompeii, garum was important enough that we still find its traces in the archaeological record. That is the second key. Garum was not a random condiment. It was part of the Roman economy. A smelly sauce became a trade product. A fishy liquid became status. A bottle on the table could say something about your taste, your money, and your place in society. But here is where it gets even stranger. Romans did not always treat garum like we would treat fish sauce today. They mixed it into different combinations. Garum with wine, garum with vinegar, garum with honey, garum with water. So depending on the dish, it could be sharp, salty, sweet, diluted, rich, or intense. This means garum was not one flavor. It was a whole flavor system. And that makes it much less weird, because we do the same thing. We just use different bottles. Soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, fish sauce, ketchup, barbecue sauce, hot sauce, stock cubes, MSG, fermented pastes, seasoning powders. We like to think our food is modern and clean, but many of our favorite flavors still come from fermentation, salt, aging, bacteria, enzymes, and controlled decay. Cheese is controlled decay. Yogurt is controlled fermentation. Soy sauce is fermented. Vinegar is fermented. Kimchi is fermented. Pickles are fermented. Even chocolate and coffee involve fermentation before they become normal to us. So maybe garum does not seem disgusting because it was truly insane. Maybe it seems disgusting because it is unfamiliar. That is the trick with food history. Every culture has something that looks strange from the outside, but inside the culture, it is just lunch. To the Romans, garum was not rotting fish juice. It was the thing that made food taste right. And that tells us something important about ancient life. The past was not flavorless. Ancient people were not just chewing dry bread in silence. They cared about taste. They cared about texture. They cared about status. They argued about good food and bad food. They had cheap versions and expensive versions. They had trends. They had food snobs. They had people who loved strong flavors and people who complained about them. Basically, they were human. And garum proves it, because nothing reveals a civilization faster than what it refuses to stop eating. The Romans built roads. They built aqueducts. They built armies. They built cities. But they also built an empire of appetite. And somewhere inside that empire, in kitchens, markets, ports, and dinner tables, there was this strange brown liquid, salty, savory, powerful, probably smelly, definitely unforgettable. A sauce made from fish, salt, thyme, and human desire. And maybe that is why garum is still fascinating, because it reminds us that history is not only kings, wars, and monuments. History is also taste, the smell of a market, the sauce on a plate, the thing people reached for without thinking, the small, everyday habit that quietly connected millions of lives. So the next time ancient Rome feels distant, imagine this. A Roman picks up a piece of bread, dips it into food, adds a little garum, and for 1 second, history is not a statue. It is dinner. And maybe the weirdest part is not that Romans loved fermented fish sauce. Maybe the weirdest part is that if you tasted the right version in the right dish at the right table, you might understand exactly why.